Okay, the handout this morning, we're in the ninth chapter of Romans. The ninth chapter of Romans talks about the sovereignty of God. And a month ago in Bible study, Mike handed out this handout. This isn't for me, this is Mike's over there. So if it's wrong, holler at me. But he handed us out, and it's really, it says it's an abbreviated version, and it's 6 pages long. So there's really a lot more to it, but it's a good foundational basis of what the Bible says about the sovereignty of God. And hopefully Mike will be chiming in, because I got a couple questions along the way.
Oh my word.
So it's going to be a fun trip down the sovereignty of God. Why is that important? Why is the sovereignty of God?
I don't even know what sovereignty means, so I don't know.
It tells you right there.
Okay, let's define it. Let's read the definition. Sovereignty defined: one who rules and reigns unbounded by or limited by the dictates of his creatures or the circumstances of time. Now, our lives are controlled by those two things. Our lives are controlled by time and by the creatures around us. Are they not?
Yes.
I mean, what was the worst pain that you have ever endured during your lifetime?
Kids. Kids.
Childbirth.
Kids?
At the 17 years after.
Yeah.
Kids, gossip, people who lied about you. It caused a lot more pain in my life than hammers ever have, or cuts or bruises, or falling off ladders. I mean, I would 10 times rather fall off another ladder than to go through some of the gossip that I've had to go through during my life.
Keep going on years. It takes longer than that.
Takes longer than 17.
Yeah, it's longer than 17. Mine are 20, oldest 22, and it's still going on. So you know.
We
Ours
do.
are nearing 40.
Dang it,
Now, you do realize, don't you, that that's our fault?
Nuh-uh, I ain't
Because
thinking it.
Always the mother's fault.
Oh yeah.
The human being is the only creature in the animal world that raises her children until the parents die.
True.
You notice that?
That's what kills them.
So, I mean, some of this is on us. It's
First they take your bone marrow, and then they take your heart.
do you know the definition of grandchildren?
Wonderful.
Revenge.
Grandchildren are God's reward to those people who don't kill their children. And it's true, grandchildren are great, but you can always get up and go home when you get tired of it. Okay, so one who rules or reigns unbounded or limited by the dictates of his creature or by the circumstances of time. Like,
Yeah, that word, by the way, creatures there, also is inclusive of all the creation. So it's talking about all the laws of nature, all the physical laws of the universe, everything God created. He is not, it doesn't bind him in any way.
yes, okay, that's a good point. You can substitute the word in there, creation. Dictates by creation or the circumstances of time. Of course, God is not a creature of time. He is eternal, both before and after. He had no beginning, no end. He's the Alpha, the Omega.
Time doesn't exist there. Time does not exist to him.
No. And it's interesting that Einstein realized that. You know that Einstein realized that? Because Einstein said that as we approach the speed of light, time ceases to exist. And it's been proven that the astronauts that went up in orbit aged less. If they go up and they stay in the space station for a year and they orbit at 35,000 miles an hour, when they come back, they've only aged like 9 months. Because the faster you go, the slower time gets. The greater the mass is, the slower time gets. As you approach the speed of light, or the essence of pure energy, the absence of mass, which is what the spiritual world is. As you approach that, time ceases to exist. It slows down more and more and more until you see, relativity means you got energy on the one side and you got mass and the speed of light on the other side. And as one goes up, the other one goes down. As mass increases, speed slows down. As speed increases, mass slows down. So when we enter into the spiritual world, time doesn't exist for us anymore. We just exist eternally. And it's a proven physical fact. All the laws of physics, everything is governed in this, but they do not affect God. They only affect us in our present physical life. So I read Psalms 135, 5 and 6.
For I know that the Lord is great, and that our Lord is above all the gods. Whatsoever the Lord pleased, that did he in heaven and in earth, in the seas and all deep places.
Okay. What's that tell you about your relationship with God and His sovereignty? You listen, I'll read it to you again. For I know that the Lord is great, and that our God is above all gods. Whatsoever the Lord pleased, that he did in heaven, and in earth, and in the seas, and all the deep places. So as you walk through your path, as you walk through your life, how does this verse apply to you?
That I have one God, and whatsoever that he put here on heaven and on earth, it can't be any greater.
Okay. Look at that's true. That's a good answer. Look at the middle line, about the middle. Whatsoever the Lord please. Please. So, when I'm going through a storm, how does that apply to me? Why would God be pleased to put me through a storm?
Something great will come out of it.
For my greater good.
They're going to be for your ultimate good in the end. Your faith is going to grow. Your stamina is going to grow. Your reliance on God is going to grow, because when you draw close to God, when times are good or when times are bad?
We should do it in both.
What?
We should rejoice and do it in both, but
And I tend to believe that when I have a good, consistent relationship with God, things go better. When I get distracted by the things of the world, things begin to fall apart. And why? Because he needs to pull me back to him, and I need to be close to him. And so basically, he's just given me what I need.
The ladies' Bible study that we're doing, 1 in a Million, it compares our life to, the Israelites in Egypt, and then what God took them through. Because that it was only like an 11-day journey from Egypt to the Promised Land, but he took them through the desert to prepare them. This is such a good ladies' Bible study. I encourage anybody they can even come to one session. It is well worth it. But it's a good reminder to me that, I'm in the desert, but he's got me there for a reason.
Right. That's it. They had to be prepared. They weren't ready to go and govern themselves. They weren't strong enough. They had been dependent on somebody else to make all the decisions for them. And they weren't ready to go to battle. Israel. They weren't ready to set up a government. They had to reestablish their relationship with God and their dependence upon Him before they could set up the nation of Israel and deal with all the enemies that would surround them. All right. So whatever happens in my life, it's at the pleasure of God that it's happening. Because ultimately, it's for my good.
You know, one of the hardest lessons I've ever had to learn is that God doesn't owe me an explanation.
Amen. That's right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly
My
right.
responsibility is just to accept that He's doing it for the best and just, He'll get me through it. But in the past, you'd be mad because you expected, why is this happening? I don't deserve this.
Yeah.
But He doesn't have to explain that to me.
Do you remember when we went through Job for a year and a half? Remember when Job asked the question? And Job said, why is this happening to me? And what did God say? I don't know you an explanation. It's happening because I have decided it's going to happen. And it's the best thing, and I know best. And the book of Job has been a lot of help to billions of people along the years to help them to understand why this miserable world we live in offers us sometimes a flawed existence.
When I asked God the same question, I heard, you don't need to know yet. And that's so powerful because I will at one point. There's hope that at some time on the other side, more than likely I'll know.
Yeah.
We'll understand everything that we need to know about.
I feel that there's some things that you're not gonna be worried about that kind of stuff when you get there.
That's
You know?
That's very true. Or maybe you have to go through this to help somebody else.
Good point.
Sometimes it's training. Who's the best person to minister to an alcoholic?
Another alcoholic.
Yep.
A reformed alcoholic. An alcoholic who has found Jesus Christ and has gotten victory over his weakness. Okay? That's the best person to help another alcoholic. And it's the same way with drug addiction. It's the same way with if you're addicted to pornography. Whatever your weakness is, God has trained somebody to help you. And that training generally came through their weakness. Remember what He said to Paul when Paul said, prayed 3 times that the thorn in his side would go away? He said, Paul, don't you understand that my strength is magnified by your weakness? And that's the way it is. I remember when somebody first suggested that I go into the ministry, wanted me to preach a sermon on Mother's Day in 1973. And it was horrifying. You're looking at a guy that had 4.0 at Purdue and had to drop speech 3 times because he was flunking it. Okay? I couldn't get up in front of a crowd and put 3 words together. And like they were talking earlier, I would get physically sick every time I had to preach a sermon, even 8 years after being into the ministry. I would get up and sometimes throw up, sometimes have diarrhea, all kinds of things. But I would step behind that pulpit and something would take over, and my weakness would just be washed away with the presence of the Holy Spirit, and I'd do my thing. I'd do God's thing, hopefully. And then when it was over, the next Sunday, it would just be right back again. And I was constantly reminded that it was not me that was doing it. It was God that was doing it. And He was pleased to have me do that. And I'm a perfect example of that old saying, God does not picked to qualify, he qualifies who he picks. Because I cannot get up in front of a crowd and do anything if I don't have an open Bible in front of me. Now, if I have an open Bible in front of me, it just kind of falls out on the floor.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm pretty much socially handicapped. A perfect freedom is an essential element. He is supreme and unfettered. Okay? Have you ever read anything about the Greek gods and the Roman gods? Atlas,
A little.
all those guys, and the conflicts they had with each other. Our God does not have any competition.
And one analogy that I like to use is, there can really only be one God, because if not, the other God's fighting this God because he has something that this one don't have.
Right.
So,
And if you read,
pretty elementary to me.
if you read any of the Greek writings about their gods, they're always at war with each other.
Yep.
And a lot of times the fallout falls on us. Well, that's not our God.
No.
Our God does not function like that. Okay? So Isaiah 46:9-11.
Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure, calling a ravenous bird from the east, that man will execute my counsel from far country. Yea, I have spoken it, I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it, I will also do it.
Okay. What's that say to you?
One of the things that makes God so potent is the fact that he can prophesy from such a distance, and it's always accurate. And that's one of the things that he reiterates several times in the Old Testament, is that this is how you can tell that I'm the true God, and this is how you can tell that my prophets are the true prophets, is they're never wrong.
Exactly. If God said it, that settles it. It's done. So, I have taught Revelation 10 times now. And going into Revelation, most people fear what's coming. Okay? Well, we've been through Revelation together, so what do we have to fear? Nothing. If the pre-trip guys are right, we're not going to be here.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And I'm not fighting that. I mean, if that trumpet blows and he says, your Sunday school class will meet in heaven next week, I will see you in heaven. And I'm not going to be whining and crying about it. I will be happy to just sail away. But if the post-trip guys are right, what do we have to fear? What in Revelation did we find that we didn't have victory over? Nothing. All those sores, they were happening to the guys with the marks. All that, the entire Bible prepares us for hard times. It really does. It really does. I have a good friend named Scott Brown, and he's a good Christian, and he's generous to a fault. A lot of people don't get bills for air conditioners and things. But one day he decided to get married, and he asked me to be part of his wedding party, and I said, yeah. And so I went to his wedding, and Scott has never had two nickels to rub together. He usually has enough nickels to to buy groceries, but God is never going to be a rich person. And I'm not either. But I went there, and I went into the kitchen, and there was a vegetable tray, and there was a meat tray, and there was a cheese tray, and there was a half a dozen loaves of bread. And I went to the church, and there's 200 people in that church. And when it was all over, the preacher invited all of them to come to the reception. And I leaned over and I told my daughter, and I said, find a store somewhere and buy all the bread you can find and lunch meat and whatever. Well, she was gone for about a half hour, and I don't know if you've ever been to Holland or not, but there's not a grocery store within 10 miles of Holland. It just isn't. So they asked me to do the blessing, and I did the blessing, and I basically said, Lord, just as you fed the 5,000 on the hillsides, we're thankful tonight that you're going to feed us. And when that was over, they were handing out food for people to take home after that was over. I told my wife and my 2 kids, I said, we'll just wait till the last meal. Oh, great, you know, I prayed the prayer, and then in all my faith, I decided I was going to fix it by not eating. It was a long time ago. 20 years ago. But that's the way it went. And when that was over, you know, I noticed people were going back for seconds. So I walked into the kitchen, and those trays were still sitting there, but they still had food on it. So I went in and I told Janice, I said, take the kids and let's get some to eat. So we got some to eat. And when it was over and we were putting the chairs away and everything, they were sending home boxes of things for people to take home and eat at home. Just like the 5,000 on the outside. There was 12 baskets left over.
Did you get a box to hold on your lap on the way home?
I'm not a lunch meat person. Nothing's changed. I mean, the whole Bible is an instruction manual for us to deal with problems. And God dealt with that problem that night exactly the way he dealt with it on the mountainside in Matthew. It didn't change. Our God is consistent, and his counsel is dependable. His prophecies are specific. You've heard the lady on TV say, there will be a great storm and hundreds of people will be killed this year. That was her prophecy. And worldwide, there's going to be a storm somewhere, and people are going to get killed, like in Haiti or whatever. They're always generic, and they're always washed down, and they're not specific in any way. Well, when God says it, it's specific, and you can hang your hat on it. You can hang your hat on it. There is none like me. I am God. There are no other gods. My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. So how does that fit when somebody is harassing you or gossiping about you or lying about you?
He allows it for my greater good.
How's it for your greater good? But you can also know that God has noticed and that he will deal with it. You don't have to deal with it. When I learned that lesson, I had my last migraine headache. I was in my 40s, and when I finally come to the point where I said to myself, you know, Every single time somebody has tried to do this to me, tried to get me fired, tried to discredit me so that I wouldn't get the promotion, they have ended up at the bottom of the ladder, and I have ended up lifted up. I either got the promotion or I got a better promotion right after I didn't get the one that God didn't want me to have. And I got a better promotion. And when I came to the point where I said to myself, you know, I'm not worried about this anymore. God is in charge, and this is crazy. I am not going to submit myself to this anymore. And from that day on, I never had another migraine.
Can I ask a personal question? Something I'm going through, and I wanted your guys' opinion. So Mackenzie came home from school last Wednesday. She said that her head hurt really, really bad, and she had a really, really bad headache. And I said, you know, why? You okay? She said the bus driver, there was a third grader boy in the third seat, and he was spitting on the kids. So the bus driver decided to slam on her brakes as hard as she could to get his attention to get him to stop. And in the process of doing that, slams Kinsey, she was sitting down, slammed her in the seat in front of her and hit her head really hard. I asked her, do you want to go to the emergency room to make sure everything's okay? And she said, well, if I do, will I miss church? And I said, yes, because we'll probably be in there for hours. She said, well, then no, I'll just take some ibuprofen or something, Tylenol, and she said, and I'll be fine. So I was angry, and I called the school. I asked the principal to call me. I got home, the principal called me, and I told him what she said. And Kinsey also said when she was getting off the bus, there's another little girl that was trying to get her sister help her down the steps. And as she did, the bus driver grabbed hold of her backpack and started kind of shoving her down the steps to go, 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 go. Well, I talked to the principal, and he said that he would look into it. And I told him I was going to go to the neighbor's house and make sure that her little girls had the same story as Kinsey's. Well, I talked to the mom, told her what Kinsey said. She asked the two little girls, did the bus driver slam on her brakes? And they both said yes. And she said, did you hit the seat in front of you hard? They both said yes. And the littlest, the kindergartner, said, yeah, Mom, my head hurts really bad too. So she said she was going to call the school, and the next day I went up to the superintendent's office at the high school, and I told him what's going on, because he's the one who's in charge of all the transportation stuff, because Kinsey's principal's not, he's just in charge of the kids. Well, I turned it in, and it's on the paperwork that I had a complaint. So now I wait. The next day, Kinsey said that she's still speeding really, really, really fast, but she slowed down or at the driveway. Do I continue pushing, or do I just, because I've already prayed about it several times, or do I let it go?
Well, if you have a bus driver that's endangering the kids, you can't let it go. Okay? But you also shouldn't be tossing and turning and worrying about it and getting a migraine headache or stressing out your child. You know, there are situations in the world that have to be dealt with. It doesn't mean that you're not trusting God, but you know, if somebody is abusing children or doing something wrong, they ought to go to jail. And we have a legal system, and the Bible says that they should be punished. Now, as far as your daughter's concerned, she didn't end up having any serious problems.
Right.
Okay. Well, God watched over her, and she can learn from this and from the way you handle it how it should be handled. It shouldn't be handled maliciously. It ought to be handled in a loving way, but you have rights, and the bus driver needs to handle himself in a way that's safe for the children.
Is it a he or a she?
It's a she.
Does she have a good record? No complaints, been doing it a long time, or is this?
I've talked to maybe 8, 9 people and said that She goes so fast. She drives so fast. We tried keeping up with her in a car one day around the S curves. We couldn't keep up with her. I've heard so many complaints, and a lot of people I've talked to said I would put my child on her bus. A lot depending on
What bus number? 7?
5.
Okay. You know, and God will often, I don't know if you noticed, but God usually uses his creation to get our attention. Usually it's not a booming voice from heaven that says, "Bill, stop, don't do that."
That'd be nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually,
And in this verse it says, calling a ravenous bird from the east, the man that executeth my counsel from a far country, yea, I have spoken it, I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it, and I also do it. God very often gets our attention by using creation to do it. When the hurricane hit New Orleans, I think God was trying to get New Orleans' attention because I don't know if you've ever been to New Orleans, but it is a dark place.
Filthy, nasty.
it was right before that one thing. What do they have there?
Mardi Gras.
Yes, it was right before that happened. And
The closer you get to it, the more ominous it feels. And it is an ugly place. But the hurricane came and it hit, and New Orleans. What was the first action of the mayor after the hurricane? People are still sitting on their roofs, and what was his first action? We got to get some generators in here so that we can have our convention.
what?
And the convention was the International Porn Convention. And most of the meetings were held in the nude. He brought in big generators to power that hotel so that they could have that convention. He didn't learn anything from Katrina hitting him right square in the face. Exactly 7 years later, on the same day, Jacob hit him again. Hurricane Jacob hit them again. And still, New Orleans has not repented of anything. Very often you go back through history and you see God's action using his creation and using other people. How did Israel get back to Israel? By way of Hitler. Now, God didn't ordain Hitler to persecute 7 million Jews, but he did. And when he did abuse the authority that was given to him, God used that to bring the sympathy of the world to give Israel back their homeland. God used it. Now, I'm sure that God didn't want those 7 million Jews to be put in those furnaces. And I'm sure that he didn't want Hitler to abuse the authority he'd been given the way Hitler abused it. But he took that and he did something very good from it. He brought Israel back home. And he set the stage for his great return to put this earth back the way it should be. And because of all of that, God used it and brought it to good. And it was prophesied in the Old Testament that Israel would return home to the final time. So, a lot of times when we go back through history, you know, it's like the armchair quarterback on Monday morning who sees all the mistakes and could call the plays better. Well, God is not that way. God knows exactly what's going to happen, exactly when it's going to happen, And it's going to be his great pleasure to bring me through it. And it will be to my pleasure and to my benefit that he does. Okay, we got through 2 verses. Get her a good big spoon.